Henry Parrish could destroy Georgia Southern's run defense early and often Saturday. We'll tell you what we made.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's episode, we dive into Georgia Southern's run defense, which was next level bad in their home game against Boise State. We're going to break it all down about how that game gives Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss a clear blueprint for attacking their defense. Names to watch: Henry Parrish and Matt Jones. These guys will be key in replicating what Boise State did to get off to a fast start and set the tone early. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC and Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy offer great different perspectives on SEC football and even Ole Miss. You might make sure and check them out. You know how I feel about perspectives. We're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And we're at the point of the season where those secondary market tickets is going to be a real thing. So Georgia Southern had a really bad game this season in week one against Boise State at home. How did you fix that? Did they fix that? They couldn't have fixed that much because Boise State averaged about 13 yards per carry. They were led by Ashton Jeanty, who had 20 carries, 267 yards, and 6 touchdowns. It was a game that led and started his Heisman campaign, essentially, and everybody talking about him as a Heisman running back because he went 20 carries for 267 yards and 6 touchdowns with a long of 77. But it would be different if he was the only one, if he was the Heisman level performer. But there was a second running back in that game that is not getting near the pub that Ashton Jeanty is getting, and that is Sire Gaines. He had 12 carries, 110 yards, 9.2 yards per carry, a long of 38, and a touchdown. It's a situation to where 2 running backs were averaging north of 9 yards per carry en route to gaining 377 yards and averaging well over 10 yards per carry against Georgia Southern in the opener. Boise ended up winning that game 56-45 or something like that. It's a real problem that Georgia Southern has at the moment. It is a real issue for them. Georgia Southern's offense did a pretty good job. They did a pretty good job. They give up a few sacks. David Schultz from Locked On Sunbelt mentioned that they're a little bit of a turnover problem coming into this season and right now. But the main problem that Georgia Southern has is that run defense, to where you can lose a game against another G5 opponent. Yes, Boise State's still a G5 school, and that kind of sets you up in a different area. This is going to be the best running game that Georgia Southern sees. This is going to be the most uncomfortable that Georgia Southern gets in the course of this season. And in that running game, Henry Parrish, who is averaging somewhere in the ballpark of about 9 yards per carry anyway, he has 45 carries on the season, 354 yards and 6 touchdowns. Against Wake Forest, he scored 2. Against Middle Tennessee, he scored 4. But the important part is over the course of those 2 games, he's averaged nearly 150 yards per game. Good running back. He's starting to get really comfortable in Ole Miss's offense, and Ole Miss is starting to feature him more and more as the season goes on. He's kind of the guy that is taking this running back job by the horn. The backup running back is Matt Jones. He has just 22 carries, but he has 165 yards and 3 touchdowns. If you look at that, he's averaging about 7.5 yards per carry. And against Wake Forest, he was genuinely good. Against Furman, he was good. And against Wake Forest, he was genuinely good after a mixed performance against Middle Tennessee. The reason I point that out is if you want to look at the what to watch for in this game, I think Henry Parrish could break the will of this defense. They give up 250 yards rushing per game and have given up close to 400 yards against that Boise State team that I was telling you about early. Other things that we need to watch for in this game is how clean Georgia Southern plays. Maybe the difference between losing 70-3 and a 51-17 cover. And that's the realm that we're playing in this game. And also, this is the last non-conference game of the season, which means Jaxson Dart Heisman numbers are going to be very important for Ole Miss. It just is. Those three things are going to be major things to watch for. And when you look at Ole Miss in the way they set up offensively, they have three really great wide receivers, two really great tight ends, actually four really great wide receivers. The running game is good and effective when it's used correctly. They're not going to line up and bully ball you. They're not going to 1980s football you, but they're really good at, hey, when you're in 3rd and 7, let's go ahead and run the football, because if we get to 4th and 3, we're going to go for it anyway. The bruiser, the thumper that we talked about is kind of in the role of Matt Jones right now. We'll see if he embraces it as a 5'7", 200-pound running back that he is. But Henry Parrish, as that featured back, is going to line up on the field against a defense that is scared to death of Trey Harris, that is scared to death of Juice Wells. There's nobody on that defense that can cover either one of them. Caden Lee scares them to death. Jordan Watkins scares them to death. And this is the choice that Clay Helton and the Georgia Southern Eagles are going to have in this football game. Do you play them straight up to where you don't worry about the running game so much, and you cover the receivers to prevent them from scoring in 1 and 2 play chunks down the field? Is that your thing? Or is your system a death by 1,000 cuts to where you leave it to where Henry Parrish Jr. and Matt Jones get 7-8 yards per carry, but those drives might be 5-6 plays as opposed to 1 or 2? That is what's going to happen. And I think, judging by the title of this video, they're going to play to get beat by the run game. They're going to make it to where Juice Wells and Trey Harris do not beat them. So early in the game, look for Henry Parrish Jr. and Matt Jones and whoever's in the backfield to kind of go off from time to time running the ball. Again, Georgia Southern gave up nearly 400 yards rushing to Boise State. That's the best rushing team that they have faced this season. We're going to have David Schultz on the podcast tomorrow. He's going to talk about what Georgia State does well, or Georgia Southern does well. Georgia State going into the Sun Belt with Georgia Southern, that's at best problematic. But it's Georgia Southern, coached by Clay Helton, the Eagles, fantastic uniforms. Because of the threat that Ole Miss poses on the outside, because of what Jaxson Dart can do. And we're going to talk about all of that as this show goes on. I think that Georgia Southern is going to take the air out of the ball on offense. They might go hurry up, as you'll hear from David Schultz tomorrow. Their hurry up is to just get up to the line of scrimmage and not allow you to substitute, but they might not snap it until 5 seconds to go in the play clock. Because of that, you're going to see them take the air out of the game. They're going to try and slow everything down. They're going to try and muck it up, and they're going to hope that Ole Miss has not cleaned up what happened against Wake Forest with the penalties, with the turnovers, and those things that can help them muck it up. Georgia Southern cannot win a low-scoring battle against Ole Miss without Ole Miss's help. Georgia Southern cannot win a high-scoring battle with Ole Miss without Ole Miss's help. That is what this looks like at the moment. When you want to look at who is favored in this game and what's going on, Ole Miss is currently favored by like 36.5 points, according to FanDuel Sportsbook. It's a situation where whenever Georgia State or Georgia Southern looks at this, they would prefer death by 1,000 cuts and give Ole Miss an opportunity to beat themselves. Ole Miss slowed down in the second quarter of that Wake Forest game. That is going to be the blueprint of teams that face Ole Miss, is to muck everything up and try and keep it as low scoring, take the air out of the game, all of that, and see what happens. A lot of these teams aren't going to think they're going to win the game, but they can see an avenue, and Ole Miss has put on film now ways that you can stop Ole Miss's offense, and that is by letting that offense stop itself. Get Jaxson Dart to force an interception, recover a fumble, win the turnover battle, watch penalties, keep your drives alive, and stop Ole Miss in the red zone. Without penalties and without turnovers and all of that, Ole Miss wins against Wake Forest 66-6. It's just genuinely not close. But if you allow Ole Miss to do that and they do not clean that up, you could be in trouble. Now, the problem for Georgia Southern is if Ole Miss's offense gets going, you could have another situation of the Wake Forest MTSU. They are very fast starting, and the worst quarter for Georgia Southern is the first quarter. They've been outscored like 28-14 or something in the first quarter. So fast starts are not their friend. Their best quarter is the second quarter. That is Ole Miss's probably worst quarter, those kind of middle 4 minutes. So if Ole Miss can get off to a fast start, and I think they will through running the football with Henry Parrish, they could take advantage of what's going to be a interesting Georgia Southern team. Now, this might be the best team that Ole Miss has played this season, but the game being at home and the things that Georgia Southern does well, that Ole Miss does well or doesn't do well, it doesn't necessarily match up with them. You know, Georgia Southern faces tough odds. But by playing clean and disciplined football, it could be the key in covering the spread. Can they rise above the challenges that they're going to face? We'll talk about that next. You know, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. You can get Ole Miss at minus 36 points against Georgia Southern this weekend, or Ole Miss in their national championship odds, which has gotten a little bit better. They are now plus 1,200. That's 12-1 to win the national title this year. And Jaxson Dart's Heisman odds is at plus 600. That's 6-1. Whatever your flavor is, you can get it today. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. You know, Game Time is your place to get Ole Miss tickets. You know, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipts, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. You know, Vaught Hemingway doesn't have a bad seat, but at least this way you can see exactly what the view from that seat would be before you buy the tickets. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all of the customer service bells and whistles you are looking for. You can take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I might even be able to help you with tickets as well. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You know, stop by the College Corner in Oxford, Mississippi, just off of Sisk Avenue for all of your Ole Miss needs. The Georgia Southern game is a powder blue game for the fans, so head on over to the College Corner or visit collegecorner.com to be ready for Saturday night's game. I'm sure Scott would appreciate you visiting. You know, this game is going to be the most challenging game that Georgia Southern is going to play all season. I'm not talking about energies. I'm just talking about all of the stuff that they're going to have to deal with in a down-by-down situation. There's going to be 66,000 people in the stadium. Ole Miss has had 66,000 for Furman and Middle Tennessee, so you can expect a sellout, hard sellout for Georgia Southern as well. They're going to be loud, they're going to be noisy, and they're going to stick around as long as Georgia Southern is in the game. So it's a situation to where the fan environment is going to be bad until, honestly, it just doesn't matter anymore. Georgia Southern's offensive line going against Ole Miss's defensive line is a severe mismatch, as a G5 team would be against a Power 5 team. But Ole Miss's defensive line and their rush defense is at the top of college football at 33 yards per game. And Georgia Southern's leading rusher through 3 games has 91 yards. So it's not going to be a situation where running the ball is going to be very fruitful for them. They have a quarterback that in JC French that is more of a dual threat type quarterback than they have had in the last couple of years. So that is interesting. So we'll see with quarterback run how that works. I think they had Davis Brin from Tulsa. Everybody remembers that name. He was the quarterback there a year ago. But that defensive line and the quarterbacks, they're going to control Georgia Southern's offense because that offensive line isn't good enough to keep Walter Nolan and Pooh Paul and Trey Amos and whoever outside of the backfield. Whoever wants to go can get there. Whenever you want to look at it, Chris Paul, he has the leading tackler right now on Ole Miss's team at 19 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss. He does have a half a sack, and he has 3 quarterback hurries. This is a big deal because we're always talking about linebackers at Ole Miss in a negative way. Historically, we've talked about that in a negative way. But the linebackers at Ole Miss this year look to be pretty good, especially the frontline starters between Chris Paul Jr., Pooh Paul, and TJ Daugherty. And you add in a Kari Coleman, you add in a Tyler Banks, who's I'm seeing him on the field quite a bit as well. It is interesting. And with that defensive line being a problem, and that defensive line is a problem, it's going to be a problem for every single team they play this year. Even the Georgia Bulldogs, all of them, the Ole Miss's defensive line is going to be a problem. And because of that, the linebackers are going to be freer to run around, which we're seeing at the moment. And because of the shortness to get the ball out of the hands, you're going to see cornerbacks in a position to make some plays. The question is, can they make the plays? Trey Amos, fantastic player. He has 10 tackles. He's like 4th on the team in tackles, but he has no assisted tackles. He has 10 unassisted tackles. No assisted tackles. He has 2 TFLs, an interception, and he's broken up the ball 2 times this season. Trey Amos is becoming that locked down cornerback for the Ole Miss Rebels on one side of the field. Now, the other side of the field, they have to figure that all out and what's going on, but that's what these non-conference games are for, as the competition's getting ready to get a lot better between Kentucky and South Carolina over the next 2 weeks after Georgia Southern. These are all going to be problems for Georgia Southern. These are all going to be things that they're not going to see at this level at any point during this season. This is going to be their most difficult game. So how they handle that and whether or not they can play clean. And playing clean for Georgia Southern is going to be a massively important thing in this game. If they avoid turnovers, if they avoid tackles for loss, Ole Miss is averaging 10 tackles for loss per game, and they're up there like 2nd or 3rd in the entire country right now. Pete Golding is wonderful at designing explosive plays as a defensive coordinator. But if Georgia Southern can play clean, they can score the football. And I'm not saying that they can score on Ole Miss. They can score it on anybody. And they're a situation where they're like 12 or 13 for 14 in the red zone right now. Ole Miss has not given up a red zone touchdown all season. They haven't given up a touchdown all season. But Georgia Southern, if they play clean, can score once or twice on Ole Miss. So the difference in this game is Georgia Southern playing clean. The difference is a 70-3 type game and a 52-17 type game. It's covering the line is the question of this point. You know, I'll give my prediction tomorrow on the podcast with David Schultz, but you look at what Georgia Southern is good at doing, and that is scoring the ball. They're not good at playing defense. Honestly, they're not good at taking care of the ball. They're not good at running the ball. They're good at scoring points. In that game against Boise State, where they gave up 56 points and nearly 400 yards rushing, they scored 45. They can score the ball. So the expectation should be how clean Georgia Southern plays is going to determine whether or not this game is a cover or not. I do not see Georgia Southern being able to stop Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to have to help out Georgia Southern in stopping that offense repeatedly. But Georgia Southern on offense and Clay Helton on offense is pretty good. Clay Helton, as you might know, was the offensive coordinator at Memphis when Eli Manning went up there and they had D'Angelo Williams. They were the offensive coordinator there. He was the coach that followed Lane Kiffin at USC. He was the coach that Jaxson Dart committed to. There's a lot of tangled ties between these two staffs and these two teams. But what it comes down to, the real of the situation is Georgia Southern, if they want to cover this line, they have to play clean. If they turn the ball over, give up sacks, lost yards, play deep into third down, they're going to be at least problematic. I think J.C. French, he's a different style quarterback, but he's a good style quarterback. But the athleticism of him, I don't know that he's going to be that much of a threat to Ole Miss either. As I like to say, it kind of is what it is. Coming up, Jaxson Dart is set to light up the scoreboard because he has to, but can he post those Heisman level numbers in what will be the Rebels' last non-conference tune-up? We will break that down next. Hey, Locked On Ole Miss fans, have you heard about ROY? Well, it stands for Return on You, and it's a groundbreaking platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by contributing directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. ROY changes the NIL game for fans. With ROY, fans can directly support players. ROY gives the power back to your favorite, gives you the power back from your favorite college athletes, letting you play a key role in shaping your team's future while helping athletes maximize their NIL potential. Plus, when you contribute to a successful campaign, you get exclusive content access like decision announcements, behind-the-scenes footage, personal reflections available only to the fans who supported that athlete. So download ROY for iOS or Android, or enter the referral code Locked On, that's 2 words, to be automatically entered into a sweepstakes for $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for more details. No purchase is necessary. Void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with ROY. Support the players. Change the game. So this is the last non-conference game of the season for Ole Miss, and it's going to be important that Jaxson Dart puts up those Heisman-level numbers that he has been acting at right now. He is the leader in passing in all of college football. The offense has been dynamic. They're averaging close to 700 yards per game. They're doing things at a level we have not seen at Ole Miss, and there's been some really good offenses at Ole Miss. But Jaxson Dart is really changing the game at offense right now. Currently, he is 73 of 88, 1,172 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That's 83% completion percentage of a quarterback that over his career had 5 games of completing over 70% prior to this year. He's completing nearly 84% of his passes right now. He has over 100 yards more than the second place quarterback on the NCAA list right now. And like I said, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he is truly the heartbeat of Ole Miss's team. You need 350 yards against Georgia Southern. You need to figure out a way to make it happen, whether through big plays or not. That needs to be a foundation of this Ole Miss offense, even though with Henry Parrish and Matt Jones, you're going to be able to make some plays in the run game. But if you want to help Jaxson Dart win the Heisman Trophy, he needs a big game in every single non-conference game. There doesn't need to be a wart that shows up in the non-conference. When you look at this, Trey Harris right now, nearly 30 catches. He's sitting at 28 catches through 3 games. That's nearly 10 per game, 436 yards. That is nearly 150 per game and 2 touchdowns as well. This is your Blentnikoff winner if this keeps up. He's on pace for 90 to 100 catches on the year, nearly 1,800 yards, and 8 to 10 touchdowns. He has a chance to have Marquise Lee, Amari Cooper, those type stats that Lane Kiffin, though that is made it famous for. Then there on the other side, there's Juice Wells, who has 11 catches for 208 yards and 3 touchdowns, nearly 20 yards per catch. He had a touchdown catch against Wake Forest that was one-handed. Absolutely beautiful. He is a guy that can stretch your defense in a way that makes you uncomfortable and in a way that you can't double team Trey Harris, who is the best receiver in college football. I just said he was the Blentnikoff winner, potentially. Juice Wells makes it to where double teaming him is problematic. And then there's Caden Lee. Caden Lee's got 13 catches, 225 yards, and a touchdown. The touchdown was from Austin Simmons. He's another player that makes it to where you cannot double team Trey Harris. And these players on the outside are going to be exactly what makes teams really respect the pass and what Jaxson Dart is doing. And looking at that means that players like Henry Parrish is going to have a little bit easier time running against lighter boxes. A year ago in 2023, everybody was concerned about Quinshon Judkins in the run game. Everybody was designing their defenses to take that away. They were okay with Jaxson Dart and Trey Harris making waves in the pass game. They didn't want to get beat by Quinshon Judkins. This season is kind of the opposite. They're doing a lot of stuff where they're sitting back trying to prevent big plays, and that is giving some space to the running games, and running backs like Henry Parrish and Matt Jones, they're taking advantage of it. I think it's important that in this game, Jaxson Dart throws for 350 yards and at least accounts for 2 touchdowns as well. I think that's going to be a very, very important step. If you want Jaxson Dart to win the Heisman, if that is a thought that's in the back of your head, he needs to have big numbers against every single non-conference opponent going into SEC play. SEC play, you can play it just means more. Whenever you have a bad game against Georgia Southern or Wake Forest or Middle Tennessee, that is a major work that somebody at Ole Miss going up for the Heisman Trophy is not going to be able to overcome. We have a history of showing that. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. You know, we pride ourselves in being offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number 1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the absolute world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link at Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't even need to search as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It is our texting program that sends you notifications on everything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, we're going to send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.